Welcome to the Curious Case. It's a joy to have you here. Tell me what makes these mysteries special for you. Share in the comments. And remember, truth cools slower than tea. Now, let's begin tonight's mystery. The morning began quietly. A thin mist hung over the village roofs. From the church tower, one bell rang. Slow, careful, like a heartbeat that didn't want to wake anyone. Miss Marple stepped off the small motor bus and adjusted her gloves. The air smelled of coal smoke and damp leaves. Her shoes clicked once on the cobblestones, then stopped. Everything felt expectant. Street Hedwig's Cross was not much to look at. A crooked street, a few cottages, half asleep. A bakery with its sign swinging in the breeze. A single cat sitting on the post office step, watching everything. Marple smiled slightly. Villages like this were never as quiet as they seemed. People whispered more than the wind here. They remembered too much. She began to walk. Past the sweet shop, past the butcher's window. Every door freshly painted, yet the faces behind curtains looked older than paint could hide. It was a kind of English peace, too tidy to be honest. Her invitation letter rested inside her handbag. Mrs. Brent had written it 2 weeks ago. A christening, she'd said. Would Miss Marple attend, as a family friend? She would be most grateful. Marple had agreed, of course. A new village, new patterns of human behavior to study, and perhaps something worth noticing. The vicarage stood at the far end of the lane, solid, square, too polite to be warm. A hedge trimmed to military precision. A garden where nothing dared grow crooked. Miss Marple nodded to herself. That told her enough. She was halfway up the path when the door burst open. A young woman hurried out. Fair hair, trembling hands, apology already forming on her lips. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Miss Marple." Marple smiled gently. "Yes, my dear. I'm Mrs. Brent. I was just off to fetch something from the church. The verger forgot the christening font cover, imagine that. The service is tomorrow, and the bishop's man will be here. I simply must fix it." The words came too fast, too practiced. Miss Marple heard the tone she had heard all her life, people explaining what didn't need explaining. "Of course," she said kindly. "I'll find my own way in. Please don't trouble yourself." Mrs. Brent looked relieved, too relieved. "Thank you. The choir will be rehearsing soon. You'll hear them, I expect." Marple nodded. Music. People always thought music hid tension. In truth, it only made it easier to hear. When the woman hurried off, Marple stood alone again. The stillness returned, but it was different now, not peaceful, listening. She looked toward the church tower at the end of the road, grey stone. A single narrow window glinting in the pale light. The sound of voices faint in the bleary and allayed. Airmen shifting benches. A woman's laugh too bright for morning. Miss Marple adjusted her hat and smiled faintly. She had come for a christening. But something in the air said otherwise. It wasn't the weather. It wasn't imagination. It was instinct, an old, familiar warning. Something in this village was about to break. And Miss Marple, without meaning to, had arrived just in time to see it happen. But something felt wrong. The vicarage hallway was quiet. Too quiet. Miss Marple set her bag on the small table and removed her hat. A clock ticked on the wall. Steady. Nervous. Like someone trying not to speak. She heard footsteps above. Light. Rushed. Then a door closing too hard. A maid appeared with a tray. Young. Polite. Eyes lowered. "Good morning, ma'am. Tea will be ready shortly." Marple nodded. "Thank you, my dear." The maid hesitated. A pause that shouldn't have been there. Then she added, almost whispering, "If you need anything, please, ring." Her voice trembled. She left before Marple could ask why. Strange. Servants usually hid fear better than that. Training made them careful. Fear made them careless. Marple walked into the morning room. She noticed it immediately. Something out of place. A drawer slightly open. Papers inside shifted, as if someone had searched in haste. She stepped closer. Letters. Invitations. Bills. Nothing unusual except one envelope at the top. White. crisp, marked with a name she didn't recognize. A man's name, not part of the household. She touched nothing. Closed drawers told you more than open ones. People made mistakes when they panicked. The door swung open behind her. Mrs. Brent stood there, flushed cheeks, breath too fast. "Oh, Miss Marple, I didn't expect you here yet." Her eyes flicked to the drawer. Too quickly, too sharply, then away again. "That's just household clutter. Bills. Nothing interesting." Marple smiled softly. "I'm sure it is." A lie wrapped in politeness, one of the oldest village habits. People hid the wrong things for the right reasons. People hid the right things for the wrong reasons. "Mrs." Brent cleared her throat. "I'm only anxious because the bishop's representative will attend the service. Appearances matter. The church must look proper." "Proper," Marple repeated, "is not always the same as truthful." "Mrs." Brent stiffened. "Truth is complicated." Her hands twisted together. "People matter. Feelings matter." "And duty?" Marple asked. Mrs. Brent lowered her gaze. "Duty hurts people. Sometimes it's better to let things rest." Marple watched her carefully. The words were familiar. She'd heard them in many villages. They always led to the same conclusion: someone wanted silence. Suddenly the maid returned, flustered, holding something in both hands. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the church sent this over. They said it was found in the south porch." She handed Mrs. Brent a thin envelope. Old, yellowed, edges worn. Something inside it slid loosely, like folded paper. Mrs. Brent gasped, just slightly. Not enough for most people to notice, but Miss Marple saw everything. The envelope had no stamp, no seal, no date, only 2 words on the front, written in an elegant, old-fashioned hand: "For the vicar." Mrs. Brent hid it quickly against her dress. "That's nothing. Just a misdelivered note. Probably last week's." The maid frowned. "No, ma'am. The verger said it wasn't there yesterday." Mrs. Brent shot her a sharp look. The maid fell silent. Miss Marple folded her hands. A quiet gesture. A patient one. She didn't need drama, only details. And details were multiplying fast. A letter from nowhere. A drawer disturbed. A hostess afraid of the truth. Small things. But small things built large patterns. And patterns never lied. Something had arrived in this house before. Miss Marple did. Something someone wanted hidden. Something someone feared. She knew the feeling well. It was the first ripple before the storm, the first wrong detail in a neat village. She looked at the envelope once more. Then at Mrs. Brent's trembling hands. No one spoke. The silence told the truth instead. It was no ordinary mistake. Miss Marple reached the churchyard just as the first voices began to rise. Not hymns yet, just chatter, soft, nervous, the kind people used when they didn't want others to listen. She pushed open the south gate. The grass was damp. Footprints showed where people had gathered earlier. Fresh, uneven. Someone had been pacing. Someone else had been standing still. Someone had left in a hurry. The choir members clustered near the porch. She joined them quietly, unnoticed at first. Observers blend in when they wish. The first portrait appeared immediately. A tall woman in dove grey, dark hair pinned too tightly, pearls too bright, for mourning. She stood with her chin high, as if expecting admiration. Mrs. Peaton, the unofficial queen of the choir, pride in every breath, ownership in every glance. She inspected the group as if they were furniture. Her eyes lingered on the younger sopranos, cold, measuring. A woman accustomed to winning contests no one admitted existed. When she noticed Miss Marple, she smiled, polite, controlled, too controlled. "Street Hedwigs welcomes you," she said, her voice smooth as polished wood. But there was tension underneath. Approval mattered to her. Respectability mattered more. Pride always carried a motive. The second portrait emerged beside the old yew tree. Ivy Finch, young, fair-haired, shoulders drawn in as if expecting a scolding, eyes swollen from crying, hands trembling around her music folder. Fear, plain as daylight. Her mother hovered behind her, a strict woman in black. Spine straight, mouth tight. A guardian who confused protection with pressure, Ivy whispered to herself, practicing notes that came out silent. Her gaze drifted to the vestry door again and again, a pattern of anxiety. Fear always pointed to something she knew, or something she had seen. The third portrait waited closer to the organ loft. Timothy Haywood, young man, narrow frame, nervous hands. He carried sheet music like a man carrying a confession. His eyes never stayed still. They darted toward Mrs. Peaton, then away, then back again. Jealousy of someone, or fear of losing something. Possibly both. When he greeted Miss Marple, his voice cracked. "Morning. Long week. Very long." He rubbed his hands together, then stopped suddenly, as if he had given away too much. Marple watched his fingers. A small tremor, not from cold, from pressure. Behind the choir, two old men whispered, their heads bent together, words too low to hear. But their glances weren't subtle. They looked toward Ivy, then toward the vestry door, then toward Mrs. Peaton. Patterns again. Whispers that circled the same names, whispers that avoided the same truths. The vicar emerged finally, flustered. He tried to smile. It didn't reach his eyes. "Let's begin rehearsal," he said, "as best we can." Voices rose. Not in harmony. Not yet. Too many emotions tangled in their throats. Marple stood at the edge of the group. Silent. Still. Listening. People revealed themselves in small ways. A tilt of a head. A forced laugh. A tremor in the hands. Villages hid secrets, but bodies always told the truth. And as she watched these three people, pride, fear, jealousy, a cold certainty settled over her. She didn't know the crime yet. She didn't know the culprit. But she knew one thing. Something in their manner disturbed her. The rehearsal began without rhythm. Voices rose. Voices fell. Nobody listened to the conductor. Nobody listened to each other. Miss Marple stayed near the back pew. Quiet. Still. Hands folded. Eyes everywhere. The choir tried to sing Psalm 23. They failed by the third verse. Too many glances. Too many thoughts louder than the music. Mrs. Peaton stopped mid-note. Annoyed. Her voice cut through the air like a cold blade. "Ivy, dear, you're rushing again. You must follow my lead." Ivy flushed. Deep red. "I'm not rushing," she whispered. Her mother stiffened behind her, but she said nothing. Timothy Haywood closed the organ stops with a sharp snap. His jaw clenched. "That wasn't Ivy's fault," he said quietly. "But someone keeps changing tempo." Mrs. Peaton turned toward him. Slow. Controlled. A smile that showed no warmth. Then perhaps the organ should keep up. The room tensed. Not one person breathed normally. Timothy rose from the bench. "Mr. Hensley never complained about my timing." A dangerous sentence. Too pointed, too honest. Mrs. Peaton's eyes narrowed. "He was indulgent with you. That was always his weakness." Her voice softened. "And maybe yours." That landed. Hard. The curate stepped forward, as if to calm them. Young, eager, nervous. "Please," he said. "Let's focus. The service tomorrow is important." His voice wavered. He kept glancing at Mrs. Peaton. Too often, too closely. Miss Marple noticed the look, the admiration, the fear of disapproval. Something more. Something unspoken. Mrs. Peaton dismissed him with a nod. "Of course, Arthur. You do try so hard." A condescending tone, the kind that cut deeper than anger. Timothy looked away, hands shaking. Ivy stared at the floor. Mrs. Finch pressed her daughter's arm, hard enough to leave a mark. Then an older tenor muttered under his breath. "No wonder practice went wrong last week." Another singer replied. "Well, after what happened, who can blame anyone?" They stopped talking the moment they noticed Miss Marple watching. Silence fell like fog. Thick, sticky, uncomfortable. "What happened last week?" the curate asked, trying to sound casual, failing. No one answered. Not properly. Only fragments. A misunderstanding. Nothing worth repeating. Just choir matters. Private. Mrs. Peaton lifted her chin. We won't dredge up old drama. Today we rehearse. She said it firmly. Too firmly. People who wanted silence always overspoke. Marple studied her face. A flicker of irritation, a flicker of fear, both hidden behind pride. Ivy fumbled her music pages. Her fingers trembled. She whispered to herself again, soft words Marple barely heard. I didn't mean to find it, I didn't. Timothy glanced toward the vestry door. A quick look, a guilty one, as if he expected someone to walk out, or feared someone might. The curate watched all three of them, eyes shifting. He looked as if he knew a piece of the truth, and wished he didn't. Marple exhaled slowly. Patterns again, 3 threads, tightening, 3 secrets crossing the same point, 3 people avoiding the same subject. Voices resumed the hymn, but no one sang with ease. Harmony could not hide tension, not today. She watched them closely, every tone, every pause, every flick of the eyes. Then she asked herself the only useful question. What were they hiding from each other? The village woke before the Sunday. Cold air, wet leaves, a silence too heavy for mourning. Miss Marple rose early, a habit. Years of quiet observation had trained her to listen before others did. The vicarage pipes rattled in the walls. A distant door shut. Footsteps rushed across gravel. Not the usual calm, not the usual rhythm. Someone was running. She stepped into the hallway just as the maid hurried past. Pale, shaking, hands pressed to her apron. Ma'am, please. Stay inside, please. But the girl couldn't finish. She fled toward the kitchen, tears already rising. Miss Marple moved toward the front door, opened it slowly. The cold rushed in like a warning. At the edge of the churchyard, 3 figures stood together, frozen, whispering in panic. The vicar, the verger, a young altar boy caught between fear and shock. Marple walked to them, quiet, measured. Her steps made no sound on the damp path. The vicar turned first. His face was white, lips trembling. He tried to speak and failed twice. Miss Marple, there's been an accident. Accident. People always used that word first. It comforted them. It lied to them. Where? Marple asked. The verger pointed to the side door of the church, the choir vestry. A small wooden entrance half hidden by ivy. The door stood ajar. Wrong. Very wrong. The vicar tried to go inside. His courage faltered at the threshold. He stepped back, nodded at the verger instead. A silent request. A silent fear. Mr. Griggs pushed the door open fully. The hinges creaked. Old hinges. Unprepared for urgency. Miss Marple looked in and saw him. Mr. Hensley, the choir master, lying on the floor. One arm outstretched, one hand clutching a hymn book. Number 237 printed clearly on the spine. A dark stain glistened beneath his head. Blood. Not much, but enough to speak for itself. The room held its breath. Music sheets scattered. Drawer half open. Chair overturned. Nothing dramatic. Nothing theatrical. Only the marks of a sudden fall. Or a sudden strike. The vicar whispered, "Oh, dear Lord." Marple knelt beside the body. Slowly, carefully. Her eyes traced the small details. The hymn book, clutched too tightly for a fainting spell. The papers on the floor, old, yellowed, edges torn, as if someone tried to hide them, or destroy them, and failed. The verger spoke quietly. I came in to light the candles, and found him like this. The south door was locked, but the vestry door, it wasn't. I swear I locked it last night. I swear it. His voice cracked. The vicar stepped. Closer. Is he? Marple raised a hand. Stopped him. She leaned in. Listened. Her face calm. Eyes sharp. A faint sound. Very faint. A thin breath struggling inside a damaged body. A breath refusing to leave. She looked up at them. Steady. Clear. He's alive, she said, her voice low, unshaken. But he was not alone when he fell. The vicar sagged with relief. The verger trembled. The altar boy sobbed. The church stayed silent. Miss Marple watched the rise and fall of Mr. Hensley's chest, barely moving, barely present. One more breath, then another. Weak, thin, persistent. He was breathing, barely. The police arrived within the hour. No sirens, no rush, just steady footsteps on wet stone. Sergeant Matthews stepped into the vestry. Broad shoulders, serious eyes. A man used to small crimes, not deep ones. He paused when he saw the scene, then knelt beside Mr. Hensley with a slow breath. Alive? Miss Marple nodded. Barely. The sergeant straightened. His gaze swept the room. Floor, cupboards, scattered papers. Hymn books still caught in the man's grip. Right, he said. Let's begin. He turned first to the verger. Mr. Griggs, when did you find him? Q, and a round one. The verger swallowed hard. A little before 6. I always come early. I opened the side door. Everything looked normal. But the vestry door, it wasn't shut properly. I pushed it open and saw him. And the door was locked last night? Yes, Sergeant. I lock it myself. I checked twice. Habit. Matthews narrowed his eyes. And no sign of forced entry? None. It was just open. The sergeant tapped his notebook. A habit of thinking. A habit of doubt. Miss Marple watched the men. Small details told more than large gestures. Griggs's hands shook only when he spoke of the door, not the body. Fear of blame, not fear of blood. Q. And around. 2. Matthews turned to the vicar. Reverend, when did you last see Mr. Hensley? Yesterday evening, the vicar said. After rehearsal. He locked up. He said he wanted to check music for tomorrow's service. He often stayed late. I left him at the porch. And did he seem troubled? A pause. Too long. Yes, the vicar admitted. But he didn't explain. He said some matters were weighing on him. I didn't pry. Matthews wrote quickly. What kind of matters? I have no idea. But he was tense. Tense. Miss Marple tucked the word away. The choir had been tense. The rehearsal was tense. Every conversation in this village rattled with unspoken strain. Q and around 3. The sergeant faced Miss Marple last, respectfully. She was no stranger to these things. Miss Marple, you saw him last during rehearsal, yes? Yes, she said softly. From the back pew. How did he seem to you? Sharp. Irritated. Watching everyone more than he watched the music. And he scolded one of the sopranos with unusual force. Which one? Ivy Finch. Matthews wrote again. Fast this time. And after rehearsal? He ended it abruptly, she said. He dismissed the choir without thanks. He left alone. And you noticed nothing else? Marple hesitated, then added, there was a murmur among the singers. Something about what happened last week. But the moment they saw me listening, they stopped talking. The sergeant lowered his notebook. His jaw tightened. So there was trouble before this morning. Yes, she answered. Trouble that didn't start today. Silence settled over the vestry again. Heavy, thick, full of hidden weight. Matthews examined the hymn book in Hensley's clenched hand. He didn't open it. Not yet. He only stared at it. Why would he hold this? He murmured. Why this book? Marple looked at the scattered papers. Old ink. New panic. The overturned chair. The candle stub. A picture. Formed. But it had gaps. Clean edges where truth should have been. She folded her hands, her voice barely above a whisper. A thought meant for herself, not for them. Something didn't fit. The choir gathered again later that morning. Not to rehearse. To whisper. To watch each other. To wait for news. None of them wanted. Miss Marple joined them quietly. No announcement. No authority. Just presence. Presence was often enough. Her first suspect stepped forward almost on her own. Mrs. Peaton. the choir's ruling voice. The woman who believed music obeyed her, and people should too. She approached Marple with a steady smile. Too steady, too calm for the moment. Her pearl necklace didn't move, but the muscles in her jaw did. "Terrible business," she said, "as if we don't already have enough to worry about." Marple tilted her head. "Enough. Choir politics," Mrs. Peaton replied lightly. "Nothing you need concern yourself with. Tempers flare. Egos bruise. It's all very ordinary." Ordinary. Miss Marple almost smiled. Mrs. Peaton was the kind of woman who used that word to bury the extraordinary. They walked toward the small pew near the front. The others watched from a distance. Some pretended to practice scales. Some didn't bother pretending. Marple noticed the detail immediately. Mrs. Peaton kept her gloves on, inside the church. In warm air, gloves that hid her hands. Hands told stories people didn't want to share. "Were you close to Mr. Hensley?" Marple asked gently. The woman's smile thinned. "We worked together, long enough to trust each other, long enough to disagree fiercely." A careful answer. Balanced. Too balanced. "And last night?" Marple asked. "How did the rehearsal end for you?" Mrs. Peaton inhaled slowly. "Badly. He snapped at people. He accused us of sloppiness. He wanted perfection." She hesitated. He was not himself. Not himself. A familiar phrase. A phrase used when someone knew more than they wished to say. Marple kept her tone light. "Did he speak to you alone?" A pause. A short one, but a pause still. He asked for a word. "Mrs.?" Peaton said. "Privately." Marple waited. Silence encouraged truth, but not today. He wanted to discuss a musical matter. The sentence was too vague to be genuine. "What sort of matter?" Marple asked. Mrs. Peaton adjusted her gloves. Again, a nervous gesture this time. Small, but telling. "It is unimportant," she said, her voice too quick, too defensive. "It has nothing to do with his collapse." Collapse. Another softening word, another shield. Marple studied her face. No makeup smudged, no trembling lips. But the eyes, yes, the eyes told a different story. A flash of something. Not grief, not shock. Fear, raw, tightly controlled. "What did he show you last night?" Marple asked softly. A sharp intake of breath, barely audible. But, there. Mrs. Peaton looked away, just for a moment, toward the vestry door, the door where Mr. Hensley had been found, the door that connected her version of events to his. She answered too slowly. Nothing. Too slow, too false. And then Marple saw it, the small clue, peeking from Mrs. Peaton's handbag. A torn corner of old paper, yellowed edges, the exact same kind as the scattered sheets found in the vestry. Mrs. Peaton noticed Marple's gaze. Her hand snapped the bag shut. A quick movement, an anxious one, a movement she wished she hadn't made. "Really, Miss Marple," she said tightly, "I won't be interrogated." Marple gave her a kindly smile. "I wouldn't dream of it, my dear." But the truth was already visible. In her posture, in her gloved hands, in the nervous breath she tried to hide. Mrs. Peaton had seen something, or taken something, or feared something, connected to the man who lay unconscious. Marple didn't need a confession. Not yet. Just the pattern. And the pattern was clear. She was hiding fear beneath politeness. Miss Marple left Mrs. Peaton with a gentle nod and stepped toward the back of the choir stalls. A different energy waited there. Softer, smaller, more fragile. Ivy Finch sat alone on the second pew. Her music folder rested on her lap, untouched. Her fingers pressed the edges again and again, as if smoothing them could smooth her thoughts. A girl like Ivy was the opposite of Mrs. Peaton, quiet where the other was commanding, nervous where the other was proud, shadowed where the other demanded attention. Marple approached slowly. "May I sit with you, my dear?" Ivy nodded. Her breath caught. Her eyes stayed down. Fear lived in the way she held her shoulders tight, guarded, bracing for a blow that might already have landed. "You were close to Mr. Hensley?" Marple asked gently. Ivy shook her head at once. "Oh no, not close. He barely noticed me." A lie. Too quick. Too absolute. Marple didn't react. "I ask," she continued softly, "because you seemed affected this morning." Ivy bit her lip, hard. A small tremor moved through her hands. He spoke to me after rehearsal yesterday." "Ah," Marple said. "And what did he say?" Ivy hesitated. Her throat worked. She swallowed words before letting any out. "He said I needed to improve." Another lie. Too flat, too rehearsed. Fear shaped it. "And?" Ivy shook her head again. "That's all." Marple didn't press. People spoke more when they weren't pushed. She simply looked at the girl's fingers. Ink stains, dark smudges along her nails. Not from singing, from handling papers, old papers. The same kind scattered in the vestry. "Did he give you something to hold?" Marple asked lightly. Ivy froze, a stillness more revealing than any confession. "No," she whispered. "It wasn't like that." "Not like what?" Marple waited. The girl's fear grew. It spilled through the silence. "It was only music notes," Ivy added quickly. "But that didn't fit. Music notes didn't leave yellow dust on the fingers. Music notes didn't frighten a girl into trembling." Marple shifted to a different angle. "Your mother seems protective." Ivy flinched. "She wants me to do well." "And Mr. Hensley?" Her voice cracked. "He made things complicated." Marple watched her closely. The guilt, the fear, the conflict tightening around her like a rope. "Did you see him after rehearsal?" Ivy nodded before she could stop herself. A slip, truth breaking through the panic. But then she tried to fix it. "I mean only for a moment. In the porch. He said something strange." "What did he say?" "He said, 'You shouldn't have opened it.'" Ivy's eyes widened the moment the words left her mouth. She covered her lips with her hand, terrified she'd said too much. Marple remained calm. "What did you open?" Ivy's breathing quickened. "I don't know." Another lie. A weaker one. "Did someone tell you to keep silent?" Ivy nodded, then shook her head, then froze again. Contradictions piling like fallen music sheets. Someone had warned her. Someone with authority. Someone she feared more than the truth itself. The girl looked toward the choir door. Toward the direction Mrs. Peton had gone. Toward the vestry. Toward the vicar. Too many glances. Too many connections. Marple saw the pattern snap into clarity. This girl wasn't just frightened. She was cornered. And someone had coached her story. Poorly. Ivy whispered one last sentence, barely audible. "Please don't ask me more. They'll be angry." They, not she, not he. They, more than one person was involved. And Ivy stood in the middle of their secret. Marple folded her hands. Her voice small, kind, deadly accurate. Someone was lying, and she knew who. Timothy Haywood sat at the organ bench long after the others had drifted out. His back hunched, his shoulders tight, his fingers resting on the keys but refusing to move. Miss Marple approached him slowly. He didn't look up. He pressed one key, a single note, flat, lonely. Then he spoke. "I suppose you're here to ask questions." Marple smiled gently. "Only if you wish to answer them." Timothy exhaled. A long, uneven breath. His jaw worked as though the words resisted him. "You've spoken with Ivy," he said quietly. "She's frightened. She shouldn't be." "That depends," Marple replied. "On what she saw." His hands tightened. "People blame the weak. Easier that way." Miss Marple nodded. "And you feel responsible?" He flinched. "Yes, maybe. I don't know. Guilt, not the guilt of a violent act. The guilt of a man who failed someone, or failed himself." Marple settled beside him, close enough to read his tension, far enough not to crowd him. "You cared for her." His silence was answer enough. Regret pulsed in every breath he took. "She's young," Timothy whispered. "She tries so hard." And Hensley, he pushed her cruelly sometimes. Marple watched him carefully. "How cruel?" He shook his head. Not improper, just harsh. He knew she idolized him. He used that. There, a thread, thin, but real. And you? Marple asked softly. I tried to protect her, but Peyton controlled everything, every voice, every vote. If I spoke out, she would have crushed Ivy. She always wins. Loyalty. The emotional flaw. The one that drove him more than jealousy or pride. And last night? She asked. What happened after rehearsal? Timothy swallowed hard. I stayed behind to clean the music. Hensley came back, angry, more than usual. About what? He said someone had found something. Something that wasn't meant to be seen. He didn't say what. Marple waited, listening, letting silence draw out the truth. He said the truth would ruin the wrong people. He said he needed to confront one of the soprano sections privately. Which one? Timothy hesitated, then whispered, Mrs. Peyton. Another thread tightened. The pattern grew clearer. Did you see him leave? Yes. He took a pile of old papers with him. Very old. Yellow. Edges torn. The same papers scattered in the vestry. The same kind peeking from Mrs. Peyton's bag. And did you follow him? Marple asked. He lowered his head. No, but I wanted to. I should have. He looked, troubled, like a man carrying something heavy. Greed flickered across his expression. Not financial greed, emotional greed. The kind that wanted truth at any cost and forgiveness even when it wasn't deserved. Marple's eyes drifted to the organ's side table. An object lay half hidden beneath a music sheet. A key. Old. Bronze. The label worn away. The kind used in locked church. Cupboards. Cupboards meant for records. Or forgotten letters. Or things buried until someone dared open them. She pointed gently. Is that yours? Timothy froze. His face went pale. No, he said. Too fast, too firm, and too terrified for the lie to stand. He lifted the key with trembling fingers. I found it yesterday, on the vestry floor. I thought it might unlock something important. Did it? He shook his head. No, it didn't unlock anything, but his eyes betrayed him. Regret, fear, guilt, the sense of a man who tried to help and made things worse. Marple looked at the key, looked at his hands, looked at the fear knotting inside him. Whatever truth Timothy had stumbled upon, it wasn't about wealth, it wasn't about gain. It was deeper, older, buried. She rose slowly, her voice soft but certain. It was never about money. Miss Marple stepped out of the choir loft and moved toward the church garden. A narrow path, frost on the grass, silence between the hedges, silence full of unfinished sentences. She wasn't alone. Mrs. Finch waited there, arms crossed, mouth tight, a mother guarding a truth she didn't trust anyone to hold. I suppose you want to speak with me, Mrs. Finch said, her tone flat, defensive before the first question. Marple nodded politely. If you have a moment. Mrs. Finch stepped closer, close enough to control the space, close enough to keep her daughter out of the conversation. Ivy is delicate, she said quickly. A sensitive girl, easily influenced, easily upset, not reliable, not for questioning. Too fast, too rehearsed, a controlled narrative. I don't wish to trouble her, Marple said gently. But she mentioned something last night, something Mr. Hensley said. Mrs. Finch stiffened. She misunderstood. He was strict, that's all. Strict enough to frighten her? A flicker, a sharp intake of breath, a flash of fear in the mother's eyes. She's imaginative, Mrs. Finch insisted. She imagines problems and thinks they're real. That can happen, Marple agreed. But sometimes imagination is simply memory wearing a disguise. Mrs. Finch looked away, toward the church door, toward where her daughter hid behind the stone archway. You don't know this choir, she said. You don't know their rivalries, their pride, their foolish attachments. A bitter tone, sharp, almost jealous. Marple watched her carefully. You speak as though you've seen more than others. Mrs. Finch's jaw tightened. They quarrel over everything. Solos, seating, invitations, favors. She hesitated. And some of them misuse their influence. Who do you mean? Silence. Thick. Calculated. Then came the confession. A confession shaped to hide more than it revealed. A half-truth wrapped in moral superiority. Mrs. Peaton, Mrs. Finch said, she has too much control, too much sway. People fear crossing her. And Mr. Hensley? He challenged her. The words came fast, and she hated him for it. She would have destroyed him if she could. Everyone knows it. Everyone did not know it. But Mrs. Finch needed someone blamed, someone powerful, someone other than her daughter, other than herself. And the old papers? Marple asked lightly. Mrs. Finch blinked. Old papers? In the vestry. Scattered around. She swallowed hard. Oh, yes. Choir records, I suppose. Nothing important. Too dismissive. Too careless. She knew exactly what they were, or feared what they could be. Marple folded her hands. You seem very certain about Mrs. Peaton's motives. She ruins people, Mrs. Finch snapped. She ruined my husband's position in the village. She tried to ruin Ivy too. And now she's ruining everything else. Emotion surged. Real, ugly, driven by old wounds. Greed, not for money, for status, for recognition, for power over appearances. Mrs. Finch finally exhaled, a long, uneven release. Someone needs to see what she's capable of, she whispered. Someone needs to say it. Marple nodded, then stepped back, her gaze steady, her mind stitching together the pattern. One rival driven by pride, one girl swallowed by fear, one young man fighting regret, one mother burning with envy and old grief. 4 motives, 4 narratives, 4 truths that refused to stay buried. As she walked away, Marple felt it settle inside her, the shape of it, not the crime itself, but the emotion behind it. A pattern repeating across every face she'd studied. Fear in different forms. Fear wearing different masks. She saw the shape of fear itself. Miss Marple returned to the vestry once the police stepped outside for fresh air. The door creaked faintly. A tired sound. A sound that had carried secrets for years. She moved slowly, carefully. Her eyes touched everything. The scattered papers, the hymn books, the small cupboard near the far wall. That cupboard drew her attention. Old wood, old lock, old dust, disturbed. Someone had tried to open it recently. Someone impatient, someone unskilled. She knelt, tested the door. It stuck for a moment, then gave way with a soft snap. Inside lay a small stack of documents. Not many, but old. Very old. Their edges frayed, their labels faded. Letters, notes, a parish ledger wrapped in cloth. She touched the ledger first, binding cracked. Ink browned with time. Names recorded in careful script. Births, deaths, marriages. And something else, a column no parish would normally keep. Confessions taken in private. Miss Marple read the first one. A simple line. A statement written in shaky hand. I wronged her. I cannot undo it. No names, no dates. Just sorrow. A sorrow someone had tried to hide. She opened the next letter. This, one folded more times than necessary. Handled, rehandled, smoothed by anxious fingers. A brief note. A man writing to a woman, telling her he couldn't face the scandal. Telling her she must forgive him for stepping away. Telling her he feared the village's judgment. Shame. Not guilt of violence, the guilt of cowardice, the kind that survives generations. She read another line. If the child is ever acknowledged, it will ruin you. Destroy the choir. Destroy the parish. The words struck like cold iron. Not dramatic. Simply cruel. Cruel in the way frightened people can be. She understood then why someone wanted these documents hidden. Old sins caused new wounds. Old betrayals shaped new conflicts. Old shame still breathed in the choir stalls. She lifted the last letter. Newer than the rest. Still old, but not ancient. The handwriting familiar, firm, sharp. The same script she'd noticed on the torn paper peeking from Mrs. Peaton's handbag. The letter read, "I have found the records. We must speak. It cannot remain hidden. Not anymore. Unsigned. Unfinished. A message never delivered. Or delivered, and never welcomed." Miss Marple folded the notes carefully, her face calm, her thoughts tightening. A micro-flash of understanding washed over her, the kind that came from decades of watching human nature destroy itself, gently, slowly, quietly. A woman betrayed long ago, a man who hid it. A child raised in silence, a choir built on appearances instead of truth. Shame, love concealed, grief fermented into bitterness. These papers were not simply records. They were the blueprint of every emotion she had seen this morning. The jealousy, the fear, the loyalty, the pride, the trembling guilt in Ivy's voice, the sharp hatred in Mrs. Finch's tone, the guarded panic in Mrs. Peaton's eyes. The choir was not singing over music, they were singing over graves. Miss Marple closed the cupboard gently. The sound felt final, not as an ending, but as a door reopening after too long. She rose slowly, her hands steady, her mind perfectly clear. The present crime made sense only because the past refused to remain silent. The past was breathing again. Miss Marple stepped out into the cold aisle. The choir had dispersed. Only echoes remained. Soft, uneven, like voices unsure of their own innocence. She walked slowly toward the chancel, each step measured, each thought clearer than the one before it. The past she had uncovered in the vestry was not distant. It lived in the faces she had seen. It breathed through their fears. It shaped every strained note of the rehearsal. She paused near the first pew. Yesterday's gossip sat beside today's guilt. Yesterday's silence pressed against today's panic. Nothing changed, not truly. Human nature repeated itself, not in grand circles, in small steps, in habits, in instincts. In the choices people made when frightened of judgment. She recalled the first letter. A man writing of shame, a child concealed, a reputation protected at terrible cost. Then she recalled Ivy's trembling hands, a girl afraid of something older than her, something inherited, something whispered behind closed doors. Mrs. Finch's bitterness matched the old confession in the ledger, a bitterness passed from mother to daughter. A bitterness rooted in a past injury never healed. Mrs. Peaton's pride echoed the same pride recorded in those old papers. A pride that once crushed a young woman's hopes. A pride that now crushed the choir. Timothy's regret mirrored the regret in those fading lines. A man who failed to protect someone he cared for. A pattern repeating itself. Quiet, predictable, painful. Miss Marple traced the threads one by one. The past was not simply informing the present, it was driving it. It was shaping every choice made in this village. Someone had opened the cupboard weeks ago. Someone had read the letters. Someone had seen what had been hidden for years. That person had learned the truth about a scandal the choir had buried. A scandal that involved a betrayal, a child, a secret, a reputation built on silence. And once the truth surfaced, everything shifted. Voices broke. Alliances cracked. Old wounds reopened like fresh cuts. The same shame recorded in faded ink now lived in frightened eyes. The same pride that once silenced a woman now silenced her daughter. The same fear that once drove a man to abandon his responsibility now drove the choir to hide everything again. Miss Marple stood at the lectern. Her fingers touched the carved wood. Solid, unmoving, like the weight of history in this place. The truth was simple. The past was not gone. It was reenacting itself through new hands, new hearts, new mistakes. She whispered softly, almost to herself. History does not return in grand stories. It returns in quiet choices. She thought of the papers, scattered across the vestry floor, not torn by accident, handled by someone desperate, someone terrified, someone determined to control the narrative just as someone long ago had tried to do. Someone in this choir had decided that what happened years ago must remain hidden, and someone else had decided it could no longer stay buried. Two opposing forces. Same pattern, same outcome. Miss Marple knew then what tied the threads together. It wasn't jealousy alone. It wasn't fear alone. It wasn't loyalty or pride. It was inheritance. Not of money, not of property, but of secrets. Secrets passed down like unwanted heirlooms. She lifted her gaze, her voice quiet. Sure. The same hands that buried the truth had unlocked it. The choir gathered again by late afternoon. Not for rehearsal, not by choice. Sergeant Matthews had asked them to remain in the church. Questions needed answers. Too many answers contradicted each other. Miss Marple sat quietly near the tuplake, front, close enough to listen, far enough to observe. Tension sat between the singers like a cold draught. No one met anyone's eyes. No one wanted to be the first to speak. Matthews began simply. Mr. Hensley carried old papers last night. Someone in this room knew that. Silence. Heavy. Rattling. Mrs. Peaton lifted her chin. Calm. Mask. Thin smile. I saw nothing unusual. A lie. A polished one, but still a lie. Mrs. Finch crossed her arms. I told you before he was troubled. Everyone saw it. Timothy looked at the floor. He rubbed his thumb against the edge of the pew. A man preparing himself to speak, or preparing himself to hide. The vicar stepped closer to the group. I fear, he said quietly, that Mr. Hensley had information someone did not want exposed. Every head turned toward him. He rarely spoke plainly, and he never spoke accusatory words. Matthews seized the moment. What information? The vicar hesitated, then nodded to Miss Marple. She may know more than I do. All eyes swung to her. The shift was palpable, a wave of expectation mixed with dread. Miss Marple stood, slowly, softly, never dramatically. She began with the simplest truth. The letters in the vestry were not random. They belonged to someone who held a great secret. Mrs. Finch stiffened, her jaw tightened. The secret concerned a relationship. Marple continued. A betrayal, a child, a scandal hidden to protect reputations. A gasp escaped one of the tenors. Another stepped backward. Mrs. Peaton pursed her lips. That has nothing to do with this morning's attack. Marple looked at her, calm, unblinking. It has everything to do with it. Because someone found those papers recently. And once they did, they confronted Mr. Hensley. Timothy flinched. He did not look up. Mrs. Finch snapped. This is nonsense. You have no idea what those letters meant. Marple noted the slip. Not what they were. What they meant. Knowledge disguised as dismissal. Matthews stepped in. Why would anyone confront Hensley? Marple answered, before anyone else. Because he intended to reveal what he'd found. And someone here was desperate to stop him. Ivy's breath hitched. Her shoulders tightened. Mrs. Peaton exhaled slowly, too slowly. A trained calm cracking at the edges. Timothy finally spoke, his voice low, uneven. He told someone last night. Someone powerful. Someone connected. Connected to what? Matthews asked. Timothy hesitated. The whole choir seemed to lean toward him. To the secret in those papers, he whispered. They weren't just names. They were accusations. And warnings. A tremor moved through the room. Real fear. Unshielded. Marple watched them all carefully. Patterns overlapped. Motives aligned. Old wounds mapped themselves onto new actions. Someone met him in the vestry after rehearsal, she said softly. Someone argued with him. Someone tried to stop him. Mrs. Finch's breathing grew ragged. Mrs. Peaton folded her hands too tightly. Ivy pressed her back against the pew, eyes wide. Timothy rubbed his palms together, unable to stop. The truth was rising, slow, inescapable. Then Matthews asked the question that broke the last layer of silence. Who did he say he was meeting? No one answered. Not at first. Then a voice emerged. Thin, faint, from Ivy Finch. She whispered. He said he was meeting him. Her voice trembled, her face drained of color, and the entire choir froze, as if a name had been spoken without sound. A man they all knew, a man they all feared, a man whose involvement would shatter everything. Marple turned toward the girl, her voice soft, steady. One voice shook when it spoke his name. The vestry felt smaller when everyone crowded inside. The walls held their breath. The air tightened. No one spoke. No one moved. Sergeant. Matthew stood near the door, arms crossed, eyes scanning, waiting for someone to crack. Miss Marple stepped forward, calm, unhurried, her voice soft, but it carried. We must put each piece where it belongs. The choir watched her like children waiting for a verdict. Fear thickened the space. Shame hovered beside it. Marple began with the simplest truth. Mr. Hensley found the old letters. He read them. He understood their meaning, and he knew they could not remain hidden. She looked at Mrs. Finch first. You feared what those letters would reveal about the past, about your family, about choices made long ago. Mrs. Finch's lips tightened. She said nothing. Silence was safer. Marple turned to Timothy. You found the key. You wanted to know the truth, but you never meant harm. He breathed shakily. Guilt, not violence, lived in his eyes. Then Marple faced Ivy. The girl trembled, her hands twisted together. You opened something. You were not meant to open, Marple said gently. Something hidden. Something meant to protect others, not you. Ivy flinched. She whispered, I didn't mean to. I thought it was music. I know, Marple replied, and Mr. Hensley tried to shield you, but he also tried to correct the wrong done years before you were born. Matthews leaned forward. And the confrontation? Marple nodded. It happened last night. Private. Short. Explosive. She turned slowly, toward Mrs. Peaton. The woman inhaled sharply, held her breath. Her hands tightened over her handbag. You met him, Marple said, her tone gentle. Not accusatory, simply factual. Mrs. Peaton said nothing. Her face remained composed, but her eyes shifted, once, toward the papers on the table. He showed you the letter, Marple continued. The one with the handwriting you recognized, a letter written by a man who once loved you, a man who left you when scandal threatened. A gasp passed through the room. Whispers rose, then died. Truth strangled them. Mrs. Peaton's voice finally broke free. He made a foolish choice. He wanted something improper. I ended it. Marple shook her head. No, you hid it, because the shame would have ruined your reputation, your status, your pride. The woman's mask cracked, just slightly, enough for everyone to see. He shouldn't have brought it back, she whispered. He shouldn't have forced it into the light. Marple stepped closer. He did so because someone else deserved the truth, someone who had lived in the shadow of that secret. Her eyes moved to Ivy. Mrs. Finch gasped. You knew, Marple said to the mother. You knew the truth long before today. Mrs. Finch shook her head violently. No. But she did know. Her denial was instinct, not logic. Marple spoke softly. The letters told the story. A man's failure. A woman's heartbreak. A child hidden behind. Silence. Ivy was not just any soprano. She was the child mentioned in the letters. The room froze. Breath stalled. Emotion struck like a soft blow. Mrs. Finch collapsed onto a chair. Her strength melted, her pride with it. Mrs. Peaton closed her eyes. Tears did not fall, but her voice trembled. He said he wanted to make it right. He said Ivy had a right to know. Marple nodded, and you argued. Hard. Not to hurt him, but to silence him. Mrs. Peaton whispered. He grabbed my wrist. I pushed him back. He fell. I panicked. I left him there. Not murder, not malice. A moment of panic born from years of shame. The choir stared at her. Their queen of poise, their pillar of pride, cracked open. Human. Frightened. Miss Marple spoke the final line gently, a line that closed the circle. because he knew the letter was hers. The vestry felt different once the truth settled. Still tight, still heavy, but the sharp edges had softened. People breathed again. Slow, uneven, human. Mrs. Peaton stood with her back against the wall. Her gloves lay on the table, her hands finally bare. No mask left to hold. Sergeant Matthews closed his notebook. He spoke quietly. This was no planned attack, no intention to kill. A fall, a panic, a flight. Mrs. Peaton nodded, her voice barely a whisper. I never meant harm. I only meant to stop him. The truth was too heavy, too dangerous. Miss Marple stepped forward, her tone soft, not comforting, clarifying. Secrets do not fade because we hide them, she said. They grow, they twist, they return. The choir watched her. Even the vicar looked humbled. For once no one argued. No one defended themselves. Ivy, Marple continued gently, you were never meant to carry this alone. The choices made years ago were not your fault, nor your burden. Ivy lifted her head, slowly, her eyes still wide, still frightened, but no longer lost. Her mother reached for her hand, a shaky gesture. Not perfect, not polished, but honest. Mrs. Finch whispered, I should have told you. I should have said something. Ivy leaned into her. A soft forgiveness passed between them. Quiet, necessary. Timothy watched them with relief. His guilt loosened, his shoulders uncurved. You'll both be all right, he murmured. You will. The vicar cleared his throat. Reputation is not worth the price we ask others to pay for it. His voice trembled. Perhaps it never was. Mrs. Peaton closed her eyes. She stood straighter, stripped of pride, stripped of armor. I will speak to the authorities, she said, her voice steady now. I will accept whatever follows. No defiance, no polished elegance, just truth, simple, belated, necessary. Matthews nodded. You will give a full statement. We will verify everything. But this is not murder. It is fear. Fear that grew too large. Fear had shaped every corner of this village. Fear of shame. Fear of gossip. Fear of the past returning. Miss Marple looked at their faces. Faces cracked open by truth. Faces learning to breathe again. Lives mend, she said softly. When we let light in, the words drifted across the quiet room. Not dramatic, not heavy, simply true. Outside, the first pale rays of dawn touched the church windows. Soft gold, thin warmth, a morning beginning without permission. The choir stepped out into that light, step by step, slow, unsure. But moving forward, Miss Marple watched them leave, her hands folded neatly, her eyes thoughtful. Secrets had been unraveled. Justice guided by truth, not punishment. A village steadied. A young girl freed. And as the sunlight spread across the stone floor, she whispered the line that completed the morning. Truth arrived quietly, like dawn light through glass. Morning settled over street. Hedwig's Cross, with a softer tone. Miss Marple sat in the vicarage kitchen. A small cup of tea steamed beside her. Quiet warmth, simple comfort. She watched the steam rise. Thin lines, gentle curls, patterns that vanished as soon as they formed. Human nature behaved the same way. People tried to hide what hurt them. They wrapped shame in silence. They wrapped fear in politeness. They built careful lives on unsteady secrets. Yet truth did not vanish. Not really. It lingered in small gestures. A trembling hand, a hurried glance, a note hidden in a drawer. She thought of Ivy, a young girl carrying a burden she never chose. She thought of Mrs. Peaton, a proud woman crushed by a choice she made long ago. She thought of the choir, singing over a past none of them dared name. Secrets had shaped them all. Silence had wounded them more than honesty ever could. Marple lifted her cup. The tea was still warm. The steam eased slowly into the air. Truth arrives late, she murmured. But it arrives all the same. She took a gentle sip. then whispered the wisdom she had always known. Truth cools slower than tea. Davis returned with his familiar warmth. Soft voice, slow breath, the kind that settles the room after a long night of truth. He set a cup on the table. Steam rose gently, a reminder of calm after complexity. "Thank you for staying with me," he said. This mystery carried many quiet threads, a torn letter, and a forgotten key. He paused. He smiled. 2 objects, 2 clues that changed everything. "I wonder," he continued, "which clue struck you first? The papers hidden in the vestry, or the fear in Ivy's voice?" He leaned closer. Voice soft, inviting. "Tell me, what moment made you suspect the truth, and which character surprised you the most?" He waited a beat, just long enough for reflection, just long enough for listeners to feel part of the story. "These mysteries," he said, "are never just about crime. They're about people, their choices, their secrets, their hearts." He lifted the cup gently. Tea shimmered under the morning light. "Thank you," he whispered, "for joining me tonight, and for sharing your thoughts below." Then came the ritual line, soft, warm, certain. "Tomorrow, another kettle will boil." The voice softened to a whisper, calm, careful, close to the ear. Next time, we walked down a quiet lane, a lane where a single letter vanished, and a truth waited in the cold. A faint clock tick echoed behind the words, steady, slow, a promise of time running toward another mystery. One quiet lane, one missing letter, one truth waiting. The sound faded. A soft bell chimed, and the night closed gently around the secret to come.